So good morning, everyone. So we are going to see today this third lecture about neutrino theory and phenomenology. And as I said, I will start first with the first part devoted to the three neutrino phenomenology. Okay, if you remember yesterday, we were discussing the mixing matrix in general for n neutrinos, and then we did the particular case of two neutrinos. But as you know, there are three flavors, so the most precise thing is just studying the three flavor picture. That is what we are going to do today. So there you have the mixing matrix. If you remember with all this counting of phases and mixing angles, if we have three neutrinos, we should parameterize the mixing matrix between flavor eigenstates and mass eigenstates in terms of three mixing angles that we call theta 23, theta 13, and theta 12. Then one Dirac CP phase, delta here. And if you remember in this counting, there were two phases of Majorana type that are encoded here. But this I just put it apart because this part, the Majorana phases, do not play any role in neutrino oscillations. So we will forget about them. So, but in order to study these neutrino oscillations in the three flavor picture, we need to consider all these parameters. So three mixing angles and one Dirac CP phase. Besides that, since we have three neutrinos, and in principle, we know that at least two of them should be massive because we have seen the oscillations in the solar channel and atmospheric channel. So we need two masses, at least two, but okay, we can consider three different masses, M1, M2, M3. But if you remember yesterday, when we were deriving the neutrino oscillation probability formula, we saw that the probability is not sensitive to the absolute scale of the mass, only to the difference in the masses of the neutrinos. Then we can parameterize these three masses in terms of an absolute neutrino mass that will be insensitive for neutrino oscillations and the two mass splittings, okay? So then for oscillations, we will measure the three mixing angles, the Dirac CP phase, and the two mass splittings. And also, if you remember the last part of the lecture yesterday, we were discussing about the signs of the mass splittings. Since we have observed the matter effects in solar neutrinos, we know that delta M21 is positive, okay? But we still don't know the sign of delta M31, so then we need to consider the two possibilities. For this value being positive, will be the normal ordering spectrum, order like that, and if delta M31 is negative, this other spectrum. Okay, this is the notation I'm going to use when discussing this three neutrino phenomenology. Okay, so let's see what neutrino oscillations can tell us about these parameters. So far, oscillations have been observed in all these four scenarios. Solar neutrinos, atmospheric neutrinos that were the original scenarios where the anomalies were discovered and the oscillations were discovered, but also later on they have been observed in artificial neutrino sources like reactor neutrino experiments and accelerator neutrino experiments. So as a first approximation, one can try to explain the results observed in those experiments in terms of only two neutrinos, the oscillation from one flavor to the other. Okay, and in that case, each sector is mostly sensitive to a couple of parameters. For instance, the solar sector is sensitive to these two parameters, atmospheric to these other two, and then with this formula, one can explain at first approximation the results. However, there are three neutrinos, and now we are already doing precision measurements, so we need to take into account that there are three neutrinos. Then, if we consider there are three neutrinos, then extra parameters appear in the different scenarios. And then we see that the solar sector is also sensitive to theta 13, atmospheric sector is also sensitive to theta 13 and delta, and so on. Okay? So you can see that going to do precise measurements, we get more information on other parameters, and also that the different scenarios are interconnected, because then theta 13 can be measured essentially in all the sectors. Can be measured in solar, atmospheric, reactor, and accelerator. Then what we can do is just to exploit the complementarity of the different data samples to get a more precise determination of the different parameters. Okay? So this is the formula we saw yesterday and the mixing matrix. And then another important thing, once we design an experiment, we also saw that. If you remember when we were discussing the two neutrino oscillation probability, we saw the different scenarios for the when the phase is very small, so essentially probability is zero. When the phase is around 1, so then it is the best scenario to check the oscillations, and when the phase is very large, and then we just average. If we want to design on purpose an experiment, of course, we want to design it in the parameter space where we have the maximum sensitivity to the parameters. So in order to do this design, we need to consider that maximum sensitivity will be obtained for these values. And this is important, and I like to show this plot because here you can see how you can design different parameters depending on the delta M you want to measure, okay? So here you have, this is just nothing but this formula, this relationship between delta M, L, and the energy, trying to optimize the sensitivity. So if you go here, you see that these lines correspond to different values of delta M squared. And then you can see, depending on this value, and depending on, for instance, the neutrino energy of the source, you should locate your detector at a given distance from the source, okay? So then you can see, for instance, to measure atmospheric neutrinos are around 10 to the minus 3 electron volt square, you need to follow this line. So, okay, if you are having accelerator neutrinos of energy 1 GeV, then you need to locate the detector at distances of a few hundred kilometers from the source. If you want to measure solar neutrinos, okay, solar neutrinos is complicated because we cannot choose the baseline between the sun and the earth. But for instance, with CAMLAN that we just designed on purpose to test the solar neutrino, so then CAMLAN is here because CAMLAN is a reactor experiment of the energy around MeV. So then putting the detector at a distance of around 100 kilometers of the source, then we can be sensitive to the delta M, the 10 to the minus 5 electron volt square, that is the one governing the solar neutrino oscillations. So this is to design experiments to measure solar neutrino mass splitting. This band over here is to design experiments to measure delta M31, okay? If I have high energy experiments, accelerator, I need to use these distances, hundreds of kilometers or 1,000 kilometers. But if I have reactor experiments of order MeV and I want to measure the same parameter, then I'm in this part over here. And then I need experiments with a 1 kilometer baseline. But you see that all belong to the same region, okay? So this, I find this very interesting, this plot. And also you want to prove sterile neutrinos with delta M's around 1 electron volt square, then you should move around this range over here, okay? In order to maximize the sensitivity to the oscillations in your experiment. Okay, so I also like this plot. It's not mine. It's prepared by Peter Denton and other collaborations in this report. And then you can see how has been the evolution in the measurement of the neutrino oscillation parameters over the last 20 years, more or less. So you can see that just in 98 marked the point of the discovery of neutrino oscillations. So then you can see that the values, essentially all the range for the oscillation parameters were allowed. But you can see how, evolving with time up to 2020, the 1 sigma uncertainty on the different parameters has been getting narrow and narrow. And this is the situation now. And then it's important to remark in this plot, you can see the moment once one experiment was giving important results. For instance, here this is the delta M to 1, that this is the mass splitting that is responsible for the oscillations in the solar sector. Okay, so then here we have a rather large value allowed, but then what happens here? Here there is just, it turns very narrow. So this is when the CAMLAN results were published. CAMLAN results, remember, is this reactor experiment designed in order to measure delta M to 1, okay? And then you can see how it makes a large difference, okay? From the first results of CAMLAN, then the uncertainty in delta M to 1 was reduced enormously. And also for theta 1,3. Theta 1,3, that is the reactor mixing angle, up to 2011, we didn't know if it was different from 0 or it was 0. But then with the design of the short baseline reactor experiments with a baseline of 1 kilometer, then it was possible to measure it rather precisely. So you can see specific points where experiments were publishing results. Okay, and I think the evolution in the determination is quite interesting. Okay, but okay, we have improved a lot in the precision of the parameters, but still there are unknown quantities that we will discuss. For instance, we don't know the sign of delta M31. I told you several times already. We don't know if theta 2,3 is larger than 45 degrees or smaller than 45 degrees, and also we don't know the delta CP phase value. So you see this is blue. This blue line corresponds to the determination of the delta CP, and it is the worst determined parameter so far. Okay. So then what we do, as I was telling you, we need to consider the three neutrino picture, and the three neutrino picture connects parameters with the different scenarios, the best thing to do is to combine all the results from all the experiments all together, solar, atmospheric, reactor, and accelerator, to get the most information from the data. And this is what we do with the global fits to neutrino oscillations, and then we get the most precise determination for the parameters. So this is a summary of our results from our group, but there are two other groups doing the same kind of analysis. Maybe you already know that. And these are our results for the three mixing angles, okay, on the top row, for the two mass splittings, and for the delta CP phase. Why two lines? You remember we still don't know the sign of delta M31, so we need to consider two possibilities, normal ordering and inverted ordering. So the blue lines corresponds to normal ordering and the magenta to inverted ordering, okay? And then this is just the chi-square profiles for the different parameters after marginalizing with respect to the other parameters. So here you can see that in some cases, we are already doing precision measurements. So for instance, the solar parameters, we know more or less the value, and then we are just trying to squeeze the uncertainties with more data. Also the same for the reactor mixing angle, theta 1,3. But there are also other parameters, as I was telling before, that are not so clear. For instance, in the case of theta 2,3, it is not clear if sinus square is above 1/2 or below 1/2. So the angle is above 45 or below. And you can say, okay, that's important. That is important in order to build models, for instance, to build models for neutrino masses. Then different models may have predictions for values above 45 or below 45. So nowadays, you can see that the minimum of the distribution is in the upper octant. There is a preferred value in the upper octant, but still the lower octant is perfectly fine. So it's allowed. So still, we don't know what's the situation. Now, concerning the sign of delta M31 here, so the blue line is for normal ordering, the magenta for inverted. So you can see that the minimum of the distribution, you can see in all the plots, corresponds to the blue line. Okay, so the preferred value is, the preferred spectrum is normal ordering. But still, the difference in the chi-square between normal and inverted is not that large that one can exclude the other possibility. So we still need more data in order to solve this problem. And finally, the value of the delta CP phase, as you were saying before, the value is the worst predicted parameter. And then it depends also on the ordering, the preferred value changes. For instance, nowadays, if we have normal ordering, results prefer non-maximal CP violation, so pi equal to delta equal to pi, while if the ordering is inverted, data prefer maximal CP violation, 3 pi over 2. So still we need more data in order to understand what is going on there. Okay, so here this is just a table with the values of the parameters, but we can just skip. Okay, now let's go into see the sectors one by one in order to understand better the different properties. In the solar sector, we include all the solar experiments. If you remember, we discussed yesterday when talking about the solar neutrino anomaly, we discussed the radiochemical experiments using chlorine and gallium, also water Cherenkov super Kamiokande, heavy water snow, liquid scintillator Borexino, and we include CAMLAN, even though it's a reactor experiment, because it was designed to check the solar oscillations. So in that sector, you know, these experiments are already going on since the 60s. So more than 50 years, they are doing these observations. And then experiments use different techniques, as I was just saying, different detection procedures. Also, they are sensitive to the neutrino spectrum, because you remember, the standard solar model gives us, which is the spectrum of neutrinos depending on the process where they have been produced in the core of the sun. We have the less energetic neutrinos and the more energetic ones. And then our experiments are sensitive to the energy of this. Some of the experiments are sensitive. So then we have, for instance, Super Kamiokande and SNO that measure this part of Borexino, that measure this part of the spectrum, the high energy part, about 5 mega electron volt, and the low energy experiments like gallium and also Borexino that measure the low energy part of the spectrum. And it's important to measure both parts, because if you remember, when we derived yesterday the neutrino oscillation probability, we saw that given the matter effects in the core of the sun, the predictions of the probability are different for low energies, where oscillations are essentially in vacuum, matter effect is not important, and for high energies above 2 MeV, where matter effects are important, and then the probability is different. So then it is necessary to prove both parts of the spectrum in order to check that oscillations are as we calculated, okay? So then we measure the spectrum. We also measure the effects, the matter effects that experience neutrinos when traversing the Earth. They are not so important as the matter effects of neutrinos inside the sun because the density is different, okay, and also the regime. But then this could induce a difference between the flux of neutrinos arriving during the Earth, that just arrived to us from above, and the solar neutrinos arriving during the night that need to traverse all the Earth and then experience the matter effect inside the Earth. So then we can also, it has been measured, this indeed, this parameter, and the effect is about 2-3%, okay? 2-3% more neutrinos during the night, electron neutrinos during the night than during the day. And also the other observable is the determination of the oscillation probability in the Kamland reactor experiment. Okay, with all this information, we can obtain the measurements on these two basic parameters that explain solar neutrino oscillations, the mixing angle θ1, 2, and this mass splitting delta M 2, 1. So you have, for instance, the blue and red regions correspond to the region preferred by solar data. You see different labels, AG21 and B22M. This corresponds to different options for the standard solar model. So people studying the sun, they provide different options for the standard solar model, and depending on the metallicity of the sun they consider, the predictions are different. Okay, the fluxes of the neutrinos change a little bit. So then this AG21 corresponds to models with low metallicity in the sun, and the MB22 correspond to models with high metallicity. So just to completeness, we consider the two possibilities, but you see that the results are not so different. So the blue and red region is the region determined by solar. In black, you have the preferred region by Kamland. And then, of course, since all types of experiments are sensitive to the same parameters, so we combine in order to get the overlap between the two regions, and we get this color region over here. So you can see that the mixing angle is better determined by solar neutrinos, okay? This band over here, while the mass splitting is much better determined by Kamland. And this makes sense because Kamland has been designed specifically to measure delta M to 1. While in the case of the sun, since we could not choose the distance between the sun and the Earth, so we are not lucky, and then this is why solar neutrinos cannot provide a good measurement of delta M to 1. But Kamland can do. We did it, people did it with that purpose. And also you can see that there is a little bit of a mismatch between the value preferred by solar experiments here, these dots, blue and red dots, and the value preferred by Kamland, that it's over here. They are not exactly aligned in the same value. And then people can try to introduce some BSM explanations to try to understand why there is this difference between the best fit values of the two experiments, okay? So the reactor sector. In the reactor sector, we are going to consider the new generation of short baseline reactor experiments, Reno, Diabase, and Double-Shot. Reactor neutrinos, the experiments are the same as, the technique has been improved, of course, over the years, but it's essentially the same technique that used Rice and Cowan to discover the electron neutrino. So the source are neutrinos produced in the fission processes in nuclear reactors, okay, with very high fluxes. And then the detection happens through inverse beta decay. So the antineutrino produced at the reactor interacts with a proton, producing a positron that is annihilated with an electron, and a neutron that is captured, and after some time, the nucleus that captures the neutron emits a photon. Then the coincidence of the 3 photons produced can tell you that an antineutrino was interacting. Okay, so the nice thing of this new generation of reactor experiments compared to the older one, not only Rines, but also some experiments that came after that, is that they use several reactor cores, for instance, in order to have even more powerful fluxes. They use several reactor cores. They use several detectors in order to have more statistics to get more events. You remember, we have several detectors, our target mass is larger, then we increase the probability to measure neutrinos. And the most important thing is that these experiments consider some detectors at a given distance from the source, at a distance where neutrinos have already oscillated, okay? In that case, since we want to measure delta M31 of the order of 10 to the minus 3 electron volt square, as you show in the plot, we need distances of the order of 1 kilometer between those detectors and the source. But the nice thing is that they also put some detectors just very close to the reactor before the oscillations had time to develop. And this is why they do that, because the thing is that in order to calculate the events here, we need to have a prediction of the number of neutrinos that are produced in the reactor. And these theoretical predictions are complicated because there are many different chains involved. So then if you just measured the flux just once neutrinos leave the reactor, and then you compare with the neutrinos you measure after 1 kilometer, you don't need to rely on this theoretical prediction. You just do the ratio between what was leaving the reactor and what arrived 1 kilometer, and then, I mean, you cannot completely forget, but you can avoid part of these errors that are induced by the theoretical predictions of the reactor fluxes. And with this technique, it was finally possible to measure this oscillation of reactor neutrinos. So then they measure neutrinos here, they do the ratio, and then what they disappear between one detector and the other is because they oscillated. Okay, so since the distance is of 1 kilometer, essentially these oscillations happen in vacuum, so we don't need to bother about matter effects. Okay, there were 3 experiments of such a type. Double Shaw in France with 2 reactors plus 1 near detector and 1 far detector. Daya Bay in China with 6 reactors and 4 near detectors and 4 far detectors was the largest experiment. And Reno in Korea with 6 reactors and 1 near detector and 1 far detector. Okay, and in all 3 cases, it was possible to observe the oscillation, the disappearance of electron neutrinos after they have traveled a distance of 1 kilometer. Okay. So combining of this result in the 2 neutrino approximation, one can explain the results using this formula, this very simple formula. Here in the plot, I'm not including Double Shaw because even though it was the first experiment in providing a measure of theta 1,3, nowadays its precision cannot be compared with the other 2 experiments that had larger statistics. Okay, so here you can see the region predicted by Reno in blue and the region predicted by Daya Bay in red. Okay, you can see the precision is dominated by Daya Bay. It was the largest experiment with 6 reactors as Reno, but 8 detectors. Okay, it was very large statistics. And finally, thanks to them, it was possible to measure the value of theta 1,3, that it was not 0, but it was smaller than the other 2 mixing angles. Okay, now about the atmospheric sector. In that case, experiments will be sensitive to these 4 parameters. And then usually in this sector, one considers Super Kamiokande and also the neutrino telescopes, IceCube, Antares, and in the future, or already there are some data from CAMI3net. Okay, in that case, we saw that Super Kamiokande was the detector that discovered neutrino oscillations. It is detecting atmospheric neutrinos since 1996. And this is a picture of the detector. This is a tank with 50 kilotons of water Cherenkov, and it could detect electron neutrinos and mu neutrinos. In the 2 neutrino approximation scenario, one can, as we have seen the formula before, you can, with those data, you can measure theta 2,3 and delta M32. And these are the results provided by the Super Kamiokande collaboration. This is the black line over here in this parameter space. So it has a very good sensitivity to these parameters. IceCube, I think you have already listened about the IceCube experiment. I will not explain many details. It also detects atmospheric neutrinos in the larger spectrum part, using 1 kilometer of ice as detector at the South Pole. And in that case, IceCube has other purposes, studying astrophysical neutrinos, but it has been proved a very good tool also to study atmospheric neutrinos. And indeed, if you can see now the results from one of the latest results of the collaboration for the atmospheric neutrinos. Now the measurement of the atmospheric parameters here in black line is impressive. So they have even been more precise than Super Kamiokande. That was the historical experiment where to search for atmospheric neutrinos. So IceCube is now improving the level of Super Kamiokande to measure those parameters. Okay. In the case of Antares, the idea is essentially the same, that they were observing atmospheric neutrinos at the Mediterranean Sea. And in that case, the precision was not that good. The statistical was not that impressive as in the case of IceCube. But the results they have been observed for atmospheric neutrinos are in agreement with also the oscillations in the nu mu to nu tau channel. Okay. So let me, before showing all the predictions together, let me just discuss about accelerator, because usually we combine the atmospheric sector, we combine atmospheric with accelerator. In the case of accelerator, you see the parameters are the same, and we will consider the experiments MINOS, T2K, and NOVA. So the same as for the reactor experiments, CAMLAND and short baseline reactors were designed in order to measure specific parameters. So those accelerator experiments were designed to check the oscillation of atmospheric neutrinos in an artificial source of neutrinos. Okay, so then they were designed in order to explore the region of L over RE of 500 kilometers over GeV that correspond to this band in the plot, okay? Because with this value, we can be sensitive to delta M31 of a few 10 to the minus 3 electron volt square. As in the case of reactor experiments, they combine the technique of near detector and far detector in order to try to be as free as possible of the systematic uncertainties from the theoretical prediction of the fluxes. So from these three experiments that I'm going to discuss, we consider T2K, that is an experiment that is still going on in Japan, and where neutrinos are produced at the JPARC facility, and they are detected in Super Kamiokande after almost 300 kilometers. The experiment MINOS in the US that is not working anymore. So also the neutrinos were produced in Fermilab and were with a near detector over there, and were detected at the Sudan mine over, I think it was 700 kilometers, baseline of 700 kilometers. And also in the US, there is the NOVA experiment that one is going on, where again neutrinos are produced in Fermilab and are detected at the Ash River facility after around 800 kilometers. But you see, in all cases, the energy of the beam is tuned in order to get this L over E around 500 kilometers, because we want to measure this delta M of few 10 to the minus 3. So since we are designing, we can choose these values. And the results are that they are consistent with the oscillations observed in atmospheric neutrino flux. And they have measured not only nu mu to nu tau oscillations, as in the atmospheric flux, but also the good thing of these experiments that we were discussing with Marcus yesterday. In the case of atmospheric neutrinos, if you remember, when we study the processes in the atmosphere, you measure neutrinos and antineutrinos. And the detector cannot disentangle, cannot say if this is a neutrino. You can do it statistically, but the water sharing of the detector cannot distinguish if there is a neutrino or an antineutrino interacting. And this is a problem in order to identify the matter effects, because as you remember, the matter effects are different in each channel. So then this supposes a problem not being able to differentiate between neutrinos and antineutrinos. However, in that case, you can do it because your beam is artificial. You can select if you just send a beam of neutrinos or you just send a beam of antineutrinos. And then you can change all these properties, matter effects, and so on in a controlled way. That with atmospheric, you cannot do that. Okay, unless there is a possibility to identify if it was a neutrino or an antineutrino. Okay, here you can do that. Okay, so those kind of experiments, yeah, as I was saying, can measure this. The nu mu and anti-nu mu disappearance, that is mostly sensitive to two parameters, theta 23 and delta M32, but also can measure the nu mu to nu E appearance. And in that case, new parameters appear because this channel is sensitive also to the delta CP phase, to the mass ordering through the sign of the matter effects, and to the octane of theta 23. So studying this other channel, nu mu to nu E, opens the possibility to measure other parameters. Okay, if now we combine all together the results from atmospheric and accelerator sector, because they measure essentially the same parameters, you got this plot, this very crowded plot over here, where you have the predictions from MINOS, T2K, NOVA, IceCube Deep Core, and Super Kamiokande. And you guys see there is a great agreement. This is for normal ordering, okay? Inverted is essentially the similar. There is great agreement. All the regions overlap more or less in the same part of the parameter space. The best sensitivity nowadays is obtained by T2K, okay? But it is closely followed by NOVA and by Deep Core IceCube. Okay, Deep Core is doing a very good job. And it starts being competitive with long baseline accelerator experiments. Okay, so up to now I have discussed the parameters we more or less have measured quite good. But now let's see what we still don't know, the octane. We don't know if the theta 23 is over 45 or below 45. Design, okay, sorry, yeah, the sign of the mass splitting. if it is, we have normal ordering or inverted ordering. So far, we have this preference. There is this preference with the delta chi-square around 7. So it's around 2 point something sigma. So it is not conclusive in order to say that the preferred order is normal. But in the near future, this probably will change. And this, one of the most promising experiments in order to determine the mass ordering is the Juno reactor experiment. So the Juno, sorry. The Juno reactor experiment is an experiment located in China. I think they're about to start measuring. They were just feeling some months ago. They are about to start measuring. And then this, you remember, we have discussed CAMLAB that is with uses a baseline of 150 kilometers to measure the solar mass splitting. Diabase, Double-Shot, and Reno with a baseline of 1 kilometer. In that case, the baseline is 50 kilometers. Why 50 kilometers? With 50 kilometers, if you do the calculation, the oscillation is mostly sensitive to the solar parameters, to theta 1, 2, and delta M2, 1. There is this component, this is the oscillation probability, or okay, the number of events, but essentially probability for Juno. Then you have this oscillation over here. So the large contribution to the oscillation probability is given by the solar mass splitting, delta M2, 1. But there is a small component driven by the atmospheric mass splitting delta M31. Okay? So this is why 50 kilometers was chosen, because then you are in the middle. You are sensitive to both delta M's. And the thing is that you are sensitive to the sign of the delta M31, because you can see here the simulation, the calculation. I don't know if you can appreciate very well, but there are two lines, one in red and another in blue. And they are a little bit displaced. They are a little bit moved one and the other, shifted, okay? And they are shifted for delta M31 positive and delta M31 negative, okay? So if that experiment is really capable to disentangle the oscillations with this level of detail, you might tell if delta M31 is positive or negative. Okay, if you remember up to now, I was telling you yesterday that this delta, we have the sensitivity to delta M31 through matter effects. Matter effects are telling us if it is positive or negative. This is another way to measure the mass ordering. Because in that case, just because the baseline has been chosen to be 50 kilometers, you will have this expression for the oscillations. And then if you can have a very good energy resolution to really disentangle this displaced oscillation, you will be able to tell if this is positive or negative. This is indeed this is the challenge. This is a challenge to get this very, very precise energy resolution. But the experiment, they claim they are going to have it. They need a energy resolution below 3%. They claim they are going to have it. And yeah, indeed, okay, they claim that in 7 years of data of the experiment, they will be able to determine with a sensitivity of above 3 sigma the mass ordering. Yeah, so yeah, they have the different simulations, and then with 7 years, they claim that this measurement will be possible. Okay. But you know, we're not all, besides the mass ordering, we're also able to improve the determination of other parameters. Because if you remember, since it's exactly designed with this baseline, it is sensitive to all these parameters, not only to the solar oscillations, but also to the atmospheric one. And then, since it's going to be a very experiment with high statistics, it will be able to measure those parameters, in particular the mass splittings and the solar mixing angle, with uncertainties below 0.5%. So now we are into 1-2%. So then Juno will be able to improve the precision on those parameters at that level. So this is like, we will have these two parts, like improving the precision of the parameters and of course, measuring the mass ordering. Okay? Now, CheMT Orca. So Jorge was showing this plot yesterday. He was saying that all the neutrino telescopes compare the size of the experiment with the Eiffel Tower. But the CheMT people, they are so fun that they compare also with this Star Destroyer from Star Wars. I don't know if this is an official slide, but I was in a PhD thesis and it's official. And then I just asked to this person to the student, and then she gave me the slide. So then you can compare, yeah, the size. I don't need to, already Jorge explained this very well yesterday, so I don't need to explain anything. The good thing of the CheMT Orca is that it will help also to measure the mass ordering through the matter effects in the atmospheric neutrino spectrum. And for instance, in the case of ORCA, here this is this plot from the NAU conference, where they say that they claim that they will have a sensitivity of between 4 and 6 sigma to measure the mass ordering by 2030, okay? In combination ORCA with Juno. And the same with the combination of the IceCube upgrade with Juno, okay? So in that case, we can exploit the synergy between the two experiments. So the atmospheric experiments, like the IceCube upgrade or ORCA CHEM3net, together with the complementarity of Juno. In the case of IceCube upgrade, they may have up to 3 sigma sensitivity in the neutrino mass ordering, and if combined with Juno, the sensitivity could go up to 5 sigma. So then these global fits, this global combination of analysis will still be very, very useful in the following years to determine the parameters that are still unknown as the mass ordering. So this combination of atmospheric neutrinos and reactor neutrinos. Okay, what about the CP phase? In the case of the CP phase, the situation is a bit puzzling, because the sensitivity we have to this delta CP phase comes from the appearance channels nu mu to nu e in the atmospheric and accelerator experiments. Super Kamiokande experiment observes an excess of electron neutrinos in their data that indicates shows a hint for a preference of the delta CP phase maximal of the order 3 pi over 2, okay? Then, concerning the accelerator, we have the T2K, the number of events observed in T2K also support the same preference as Super K. They prefer delta CP around 3 pi over 2. However, NOVA results, the preference depends on the ordering. So for inverted ordering, they are in agreement with Super K and with T2K, but for normal ordering, they prefer non-maximal delta CP phase. So still, we need more data in order to understand what is going on there. And then in order to disentangle this thing about the delta CP phase, we will need to wait until the next generation experiments like Dune or HyperK that I will also mention. Yeah, this next generation experiment. So, you know, Juno is already taking data, CHEM3net already taking data. For this experiment, we will need to wait a bit longer. So this we call next generation. So Dune will be a long baseline experiment located in the US, okay, using a detector with four different modules of 10 kilotons of liquid argon. And it will be a wide beam experiment. So with the energy will not be, the spectrum will not be very narrow in energy, will be quite wide, because the idea is to explore not only the first oscillation maximum, but also the second oscillation maximum, in order to have more sensitivity. Okay, and in the case of Hyper Kamiokande, is the extension of Super Kamiokande. We have Kamiokande, the Super Kamiokande, afterwards Hyper Kamiokande. So the proposal is to build this almost 200 kiloton water Cherenkov, and with a baseline of the same baseline as Super Kamiokande, around 300 kilometers. While for Dune, the baseline will be 300 kilometers. So 300 kilometers and 300 kilometers. Then, due to this baseline, each of them will be especially sensitive to different parameters. For instance, in the case of Dune, since the baseline will be longer, it will be more sensitive to the mass effect, to the matter effect, and then to the mass ordering, okay? While in the case of Hyper Kamiokande, since the baseline is shorter, then the matter effect will be less important, but then it will be better to measure delta CP violation, okay? You wanna?
Do you know like the current status of Dune, like when will it like?
We will have the collaboration. I'm part of the collaboration, but you see, we will have the collaboration meeting in September in Valencia, and then there we will discuss. But I mean, from what I know, the plans have been delayed a lot for the detectors. I don't know if there is somebody from the collaboration here as well, some student there. So maybe you have more information. Yeah. Yeah, because you see, I'm there from longer than you. Then maybe because first they told us that the detector will be working on 2025. That obviously not. Now the last date I know is one module in 2027. I don't know if yeah, yeah. So not easy. Okay. Okay. There is a comment. We can, yes. What about STRI?
So to study active to stereo neutrino oscillations, what should be the profile of neutrinos like energy?
I will discuss later. I will discuss later, yes.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Pavan.
Okay, just very briefly to discuss the sensitivity. So in the case of Dune, so these are the best case scenarios for measuring the mass ordering and the delta CP phase, okay? In principle, if the parameters are in the best case scenarios, they are the most convenient parameters, one may have a sensitivity over 5 sigma in the mass ordering in only 1 year, okay? Because this will be a very, very large statistic experiment for mass ordering. While in the case of CP violation, the statistic will be about 3 sigma in 3.5 years. This is for the best case scenario. So if the parameters are in the perfect configuration. In the worst case scenario, then we may need to wait 3 years in order to have 5 sigma sensitivity in the mass ordering and more than 10 years to measure this sensitivity in delta CP. Because remember, Dune is better suited to measure mass ordering. While in the case of Hyper Kamiokande, so they may have a discovery over 5 sigma for CP violation for part of the parameter space, okay? And in the case of the mass ordering, they will need about, this is I think 10 years in order to have a sensitivity for the mass ordering. But yeah, in order to get, now with the results we have so far, we are not able to be beyond 3 sigma. So then with Juno, we will improve a little bit. And in order to have results above 5 sigma, we will need to wait for those experiments, next generation, Dune or Hyper-K. Okay? So I would like to mention a little bit on neutrino masses because I don't know if Vivian has mentioned a little bit, I guess from cosmology.
Yeah, the mass limits.
The mass limits he has discussed. Okay. Okay. So just to mention that also from oscillations, even though oscillations are insensitive to the absolute scale of neutrino mass, we may have a limit, okay, provided that we know the mass of the heaviest state. So we know from oscillations, so assuming this is 0, okay, so we know the mass splitting between the lighter and the heaviest, and then from oscillations we know that the mass of the heaviest should be larger than the square root of delta M31 square. So then we know that we have this lower limit. Lower limit on the neutrino mass should be 0.05 electron volt, approximately. Okay, and then I have this slide just putting all together some results. So from oscillations, we get those, we have the lower limit. And then from direct constraints, I don't know if somebody mentioned, there are these kinematical experiments like Catherine, for instance, trying to measure the scale of neutrino masses. And so far, the limit, there is an upper limit. This mass that is not, is an effective mass. This M beta is a mass that is a combination of the masses of the states and also the mixing angles, okay? Is below 0.45 electromoles. And then this about the cosmology that I guess it was already discussed by Vivian, so I'm not going to, but there is some trouble over there, I guess he discussed, with these latest DESI results that are putting already in trouble the inverted ordering option, okay? Because with this DESI, you know that cosmology can only constrain the sum of the total masses, and the constraint from DESI is already putting in trouble the value that it comes from inverted ordering, okay? But still, there is something going on, and I'm not an expert, so I just leave that to Vivian. So just let me, to finalize, comment a little bit on the physics beyond the standard model. So we know we have seen several neutrino results that suggest the presence of physics beyond the standard model to explain different aspects. For instance, we need to explain why neutrinos have a mass, first of all, because in the standard model they have no mass, and also why the mass is so light compared to the mass of the other particles. So we need to introduce a mass mechanism and try to fit this mass mechanism with the size of the masses that are lighter than from the other particles. Also, if you remember, in the first lecture, I talked a little bit about the flavor problem. So why the mixing is so different in the lepton sector, in the quartz sector. So this in principle should be addressed as well by this BSM physics. And we will discuss there are some short distance anomalies that indicate the presence of additional neutrinos. So in this context, many different BSM scenarios have been analyzed in the literature. So for instance, I will discuss a little bit about the presence of light sterile neutrinos. So far I'm discussed only the presence of 3 neutrinos, but they may have other neutrinos that could be light or could be heavy. So they could be heavy in such a way that they will not have an impact directly on the experiments, because they will not be able to be produced at the experiments, but they will be there and they will give a hint. Also some new interactions of neutrinos with matter, or for instance, exotic electromagnetic neutrino properties that they are absent in the standard model, but they may appear in extensions of the standard model. And then the important thing is that the presence of all these new physics scenarios may affect the current description I have given up to today, okay? Because this is very nice, okay? But this is not valid in the presence of BSM, okay? Because this has been derived just assuming 3 neutrinos. If we consider either light sterile neutrinos, heavy neutrinos, neutrino electromagnetic properties, then this may change. So then I want to have this in mind. So up to now, I have discussed everything standard. But if we start introducing non-standard things, then the 3 neutrino picture may change significantly, okay? So, sterile neutrino. What I mean when I talk about a sterile neutrino, what it is. So sterile neutrino is essentially a singlet fermion of the standard model, okay? It has no interactions. It's a particle that has no interactions, except that for the Higgs has no weak interactions, okay? The motivations for sterile neutrinos, there are several motivations. So for instance, sterile neutrinos can explain these anomalies I will discuss in next slide. Some results, some experimental results that do not fit with our current understanding of the neutrino data. They can explain the small neutrino masses through the seesaw mechanism. We saw that with the seesaw mechanism, we can include very heavy right-handed neutrinos that are essentially sterile neutrinos in order to explain the lightness of the neutrino mass. Also in that scenario, the presence of these sterile neutrinos can explain the baryon asymmetry of the universe via the leptogenesis mechanism, and they could be part of the dark matter of the universe, just like some motivations for sterile neutrinos. Okay, so what are the hints for the presence of light sterile neutrinos? So there are these anomalies, there are essentially 3 anomalies, pointing to the need of perhaps considering the presence of these extra neutrinos. So the first one, the original one, let's say, was the LSND and mini-Boone anomaly, where there was some observation of oscillations in the channel between anti-nu and anti-nu E, okay? There was a disappearance of anti-mu neutrinos in a beam, and in order to explain these oscillations, one could not use the delta M parameters that we know from atmospheric and from solar. We know that from atmospheric, delta M is of order 10 to the minus 3 electron volt square. From solar, it is order 10 to the minus 5. But with those delta M, one was not able to explain those oscillations. And then the reactor anomaly that appeared, it started in 2011, once a reevaluation of the theoretical fluxes in reactors was done. So these fluxes were evaluated, and then these new calculations were given a much larger values than before. Then with those larger predictions, the observations were reporting a deficit in the number of neutrinos at the detectors. And again, there was like an oscillation between anti-nu E and other flavors that needed to be explained also with delta M square of order 1 electron volt. And there is the third anomaly, the called gallium anomaly, that is an anomaly that appears in the calibration of the solar gallium experiments. So you remember these radiochemical gallium experiments, they use some radioactive sources in order to calibrate the detector. So they have some measurements using sources of chromium and argon. They have these sources of radioactive that emit neutrinos, and then they measure in the gallium, the cross-section, and the reported measurements are lower than the predictions. So this could be understood also in terms of an oscillation between the nu E produced in the radioactive sources that oscillated to other flavors. So these 3 anomalies can be understood assuming that there is some oscillations with delta M square of the order 1 electron volt, okay? How to interpret that? So we have the solar data, you need this value of order 10 to the minus 5, the atmospheric 10 to the minus 3, and then you have 3 anomalies pointing to a value of order 1 electron volt square. If you have 3 neutrinos, you cannot accommodate these 3 different values for the difference of masses. You need 4 neutrinos, okay? Because you have very different mass splittings. So the only way you have is just to add a new state, and then you can have the 3 different splittings. Okay, and then you can do it, you can accommodate the splittings in 2 different ways. These are the so-called 2+2 mass schemes, where you have this gray is the sterile part. If you remember, it's the same plot we saw for 3 neutrinos, but here we have the sterile part in gray, okay? And the 3+1, that essentially it's the three neutrino state, and on top of that, you have the sterile one, okay? So, and this 4th neutrino is sterile because if you remember from the measurement of the invisible decay of the width, of the invisible decay width of Z at LEP, we saw that the number of neutrinos that couple to the Z is around 3. So if we need a 4th neutrino, it should be sterile. It could not interact with the Z boson, okay? So then we have these 2 possibilities. Already many years ago, the 2+2 scheme was discarded because with the 2+2 scheme, we need that the sterile neutrino participates both in the oscillation of solar neutrinos and atmospheric neutrinos, and data are not in agreement with that. So the results of solar experiments do not like to have a sterile component, and same for atmospheric neutrinos. So this scheme is not valid. So then we need to consider the 3+1 scenario, having the three light sterile, and then the 3 active neutrinos, and the sterile on top of that, with a difference of 1 electron volt square. Okay? So what's the status of this thing? So the LSMD anomaly has been tested for many years, first with the mini-boon, then with the micro-boon experiment, and so far, not enough evidence have been obtained to confirm or rule out the anomaly. So we have already 2 experiments trying to confirm, but still there are no, the situation is unclear. Concerning the reactor anomaly, new theoretical models for the reactors produce new predictions, and then it turns out that these new theoretical calculations, at the end, they concluded that the predictions done in 2011 were overestimating part of the reactor flux. Okay, so at the end, the new predictions go back to the old results, and they predict lower fluxes. So at the end, this means that experimental results are okay. Okay, so there was this theoretical predictions trying to predict more neutrinos. New predictions say that should be lower. So essentially, the reactor neutrino anomaly is gone. Okay, and for the gallium anomaly, the situation is more puzzling because there was this recent experiment, BEST, in the Baksan, that confirms that still the result is there. They have used other sources. These are the results from the anomaly in Sage and Galix, and then BEST, they have measured again the same kind of processes, and they get the same results. So it seems this anomaly is still there. So the situation is the following: with the LSMD mini-boon, we don't know the situation. The reactor anomaly is gone, and the gallium anomaly is still alive and kicking, so it's still there. So let's see. However, there is a problem because we cannot, I mean, these are just the results for the hints of the 3+1 of the sterile neutrinos, but we cannot forget that there are some other experiments in the world where if sterile neutrinos are there, they should have seen a signal, okay? So for instance, you have all these appearance experiments like Super Kamiokande, IceCube, MINOS, Plus, and those experiments have not seen any signal of the presence of sterile neutrinos. Then we need to put in context these evidences for light sterile neutrinos together with all the other experiments. And this is what is done in these global fits for 3+1 neutrinos. And then you see that in that plot, these are the region, this is the region preferred by the appearance experiments, by the combination of those evidences, LSMD, reactor, and so on. And then this line, blue line, marks the region that is excluded by all the other experiments. And the exclusion region is all to the right. So you see that there is a tension. So those experiments prefer these values of the parameter space, and the other experiment just exclude it. So the situation is very complicated. And also we cannot forget cosmology, because cosmology is really in trouble with having this one sterile neutrino. Because in cosmology, you have seen with Vivian, I guess, that cosmology gives you not only the sum of neutrino masses, but also the number of effective neutrinos, the number of relativistic degrees of freedom. And in that case, if we consider the presence of a 4th sterile neutrino, first of all, we need to increase the value for the sum of neutrino masses, and this will go up to 1 electron volt. And if inverted ordering was in trouble with DESI, this is much more in trouble. So this is completely incompatible with cosmology. And also in that case, we will need a number of effective degrees of freedom equal to 4. That is in conflict with cosmological constraints that give you a value of around 3. So this hypothesis of the light sterile neutrino is in conflict either with all the other experiments that have not seen a signal and also with cosmology. So still the situation needs to be determined. So now let me discuss about, we have been discussing about light sterile neutrinos. What about heavy sterile neutrinos? So you remember when we were discussing about models of neutrino masses, in most of the, of course, in the seesaw mechanisms, for instance, we were including new heavy extra states in order to explain the lightness of the neutrino mass. Okay, for instance, we saw the type 1 seesaw. These are the mass matrices for the type 1 seesaw or the inverse seesaw. So in that case, we are including new particles, new heavy states that mixed with the light active neutrinos. So instead of having the 3x3 mixing with the light active neutrinos, those extra states we add will mix as well with the 3 active neutrinos. So instead of having a 3x3 mixing matrix unitary, we will need a n times n unitary matrix, including the extra degrees of freedom. Okay, this poses a problem because then if you have this scenario, your full matrix n times n will be unitary, but your 3x3 in general will not be unitary because it will be just a part. So then what we do in this kind of jobs is trying to understand how the presence of new extra degrees of freedom affects the unitarity of the 3x3 mixing matrix. Okay, so in that case, one is to go back to the counting of parameters that I put also in the exercises sheet. We can see this afternoon if you like. So in that case, one needs to parameterize the 3x3 mixing matrix, taking into account that it will not be unitary anymore. So then you need to revise how we calculated the number of parameters in the 3x3 mixing matrix and recalculate it in case of not having a unitary matrix. In that case, we will see that we will need 9 extra parameters to describe the non-unitary 3x3 matrix, okay? This means that we will need to include to our PMNS matrix these 9 new parameters. This will include new phases. And then this will be a problem because in addition of the standard Dirac CP phases that we have seen that have an impact on neutrino oscillations, we will need to include new CP phases. And the new CP phases will have an effect on the oscillation experiments. And then the generations will be appearing between the standard model phases and the non-unitarity phases. Okay, so here you see how the probability in the new to new channel can be modified in presence of non-unitarity. You will be new phases, phi, in addition to the delta Dirac CP phase delta. And then these 2 phases will be describing the oscillations of neutrinos. And then one should be very careful because when you think you are measuring delta, perhaps you are not measuring delta, you are measuring just the degeneracy between delta and phi. And then this might spoil the sensitivity. I told you that the sensitivity of hyper K and Dune is very good, okay, for delta, unless we have this kind of effect, because in that case, if there is non-unitarity, new phases will appear. And then, for instance, we have done this analysis in the Dune collaboration, and where you were expecting a 5 sigma sensitivity on the discovery of the delta CP phase, allowing for non-unitarity might decrease your sensitivity dramatically. Okay, so one needs to take into account also these deviations from the standard model due to the presence of new physics. So I think I will stop here. I want to discuss a little bit of non-standard interactions and yeah, and a bit of Siemens, but I think it's okay. If you want to discuss over the coffee, we can ask me. Okay.
Thank you, Mariam. Thank you. Are there urgent questions now before the coffee break? So doesn't seem to be the case. So this was Mariam's third lecture. Thank you very much. So let's have a great round of applause.